Would anybody want to be a member of our community? So can the conversation itself be an evangelistic tool?
Thank you.
Hold. Reverend Jesse,
I think it's important to say this. Since we're talking about Christianity and we're talking about what the Bible says, let's talk about what Jesus said. And let's remember that Jesus said exceedingly little about what we should believe, what our doctrinal belief should be, but he said exceedingly much about how we should live and how we should treat each other. And he gave us his most major mode of judgment that God will use for us and we should use for one another is in Matthew 25. And he says that you have to treat each other right, feed the hungry, clothe the naked. And he says, as you have not done it to the least of these, you have not done it to me. And if you haven't done it to me, goes on to say, then you're going to hell if you have not loved your neighbor. Now that's very fundamental. It says that we must judge each other by the way we treat each other. And if bedroom politics we feel is not consistent with what the Bible says or we disagree, that's between that person and God. But I have to say this, when I did the C-SPAN special, and people were asking me all these questions about the gay community, I said, look, let me ask you this. Dick Cheney is heterosexual. Am I supposed to take Dick Cheney over someone, and I can name many, who struggle to love their neighbor, who try to do everything right and live lives that are admirable in every other way, and who have even been faithful for decades to one person. But they happen to live they happen to love someone of the same gender. Am I supposed to choose Dick Cheney with his evil ways over someone like that? According to the Christian Witness, no, that we are not. We are to judge each other about how we treat each other in the world and how much we're trying to make a difference in the world. And the rest of it, we have to leave to God. Last statement. I don't know anybody who's forcing homosexuality on anyone else. We're the ones who are talking all the ugly talk and acting like these aren't human beings. These are people,
yes,
like you and I. They're God's children, and we have to stop demonizing them and marginalizing them and talking about them in ways that Jesus would never, ever condone.
Thank you.
I was trying to wait. You know, on that question in passing, preachers discussed this. If I go to your church one Sunday and your choir is mostly empty and no musicians, I know you're serious about this question.
Yes, you did.
I mean, that's one. Say amen, church. Well, where I thought we were going, I'm trying to get there, is, we can open up, Dr. Obi, is that Dr. King's assassination anniversary is this coming Saturday. What made him different than eloquent preachers of his time, and there were a lot of them, and we're here in his tradition, really, he challenged the law, actual versus academic interpretations of the law. There is no risk in interpreting the law. There is risk in actualizing it. So, preaching about Pharaoh is easy. That's street corner preaching in Harlem when the fight is in Alabama. Preaching about Pharaoh, he's a trouble guy. Preaching to Pharaoh, let my people go. It's a little harder than preaching about him when he can't hear you. But I think the central question here is preaching to David, who was our own guy. When your crowd is for David, right or wrong. That's different than preaching to or about Pharaoh. So when Nathan goes up, when the crowd is with David, he's our guy. has enough access to get to him, enough prophetic distance to say, you know, all those sheep, you know how the story goes, all those sheep, and you left them and took one guy's baby lamb. David says, that's a terrible guy. He said, I'm talking about you. Confronting David is different than confronting Pharaoh on issues of truth. That's where the cutting edge, so that when Pharaoh will lock the Haitians out and let the Cubans in, we protest against it.
Wow.
But a month ago, when our situation locks out the Haitians like they did, the New York Times takes an editorial position against it, and we don't. Does that weaken our moral authority? Y'all with me so far? That's the question. When, in concrete terms, and we got all the focus on the Gaza, and we ought to have on the Gaza, but we lost 1,000 in the Gaza with 3,500 of cholera alone in Zimbabwe. Where's the envoy to Zimbabwe? It's ridiculous. We want to focus on the G20 in Europe, but 6 million have died in Sudan and Congo in the last 8 years. They count 2. On our civil rights record, Richardson, there are 9 cases before this Supreme Court, 2 of which challenge the Voting Rights Act, Section 2 and 5, and the argument being, in the age of Obama, do we need the Voting Rights Act enforced? That's before this Supreme Court. Now, in the Section 2 ruling was we need less of it, and Section 5 could be to it what the Reconstruction was in 1877. I mean, even as we talk today, before the Supreme Court are 9 Supreme Court cases, 1 dealing with affirmative action coming out of New Haven, Connecticut, Boyce's territory, and 2 coming out of the Voting Rights Act, 1 coming out of Texas. Lastly, when the Urban League's data shows that blacks are twice more likely to be unemployed, 3 times more likely to be in poverty, 6 times more likely to be in jail, and with 1 million black men in jail, what difference will that make now? To me, those are stickier, without making a judgment, or those are stickier questions. You know, because in the Pharaoh day, we could just grab back and just blast Pharaoh, right? Talk by them a lot, talk to them a little. But now, when our David is in charge, if we're looking at my brother or the president, and that's a big distinction between how we deal with the emotions of my brother versus my president, because my president has a very different set of options that he deals with. I mean, as we can, I close on this note, when Brother Fonda tells a story ever so often, that a group of black leaders, April Randolph and others, met with Roosevelt and laid out the black agenda. He said, I agree, now go out and make me do it. So I just want to righteously protest in such a way that one moves this David to hit us, because there's competition saying, take us for granted. Matter of fact, in the stimulus plan, the issue is not there against affirmative action. There's always shovel ready. And while our shovel is getting ready, they're getting grants without even solicitation. That comes back to a more concrete, that's Fox and ABC News Tonight debate. That's not an in-house debate. That is, tonight, do we accept the premise that when the stimulus comes out, does it getting down is not a legitimate debate? There are those who would say it's illegitimate to even discuss that debate because it might embarrass our David. But David has a role, but so does Nathan. Cannot compromise his lane, not his agenda. Nathan was close enough to David to be friendly to him, but Nathan could not compromise his lane, not his agenda. Because David was accountable to people, Nathan was accountable to God. That is, am I making sense to you? I think that's where the tension comes in. I hope we'll address more specifically that tension, because right now, if we are afraid to deal with that tension, then we are sucked under.
Thank you. Let me say, I want to take my imposter. You know, I've been getting away. I've been getting away for the last hour and a half, being the famous Freddie Haynes of Dallas, Texas. And now I got to take my cover off. He blew my cover. He showed up straight from the airport. I really appreciate him being here. and I want you to celebrate